The Nintendo 64 has 393 licensed games, and I'm going to play them all. .3D gaming, although nowadays it may be impossible to imagine a world without it, was a relatively new frontier to explore in the mid-90s. Early attempts to create playable experiences within this new dimension were limited by the hardware capabilities of the consoles at the time, and so when Nintendo's latest console, the N64, came into being, with its power to process 3D models and worlds under the flag of a much-loved company, programmers and developers flocked to take advantage of what it had to offer. What we must remember is, features we now take for granted had to be discovered and developed step by step, and certain titles really managed to push the boundaries and showcase the trajectory of where 3D platforming could go. Titles I've covered previously, namely Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, are prime examples of how to create an experience within this new frontier. The detail of character animations, the richness of graphics and textures, and the sheer scope of being able to explore a non-linear open world with multiple events happening in whatever order you choose to tackle them are what solidified these games as blueprints for modern 3D gaming and earned a place in the hearts of gamers everywhere. However, for every hit, there will always be a miss, and as much as it may upset some people, I consider one of those misses to be Chameleon Twist. Released in 1997, Chameleon Twist was a product of developers Japan Supply System, an Osaka-based company that only produced a handful of games for various systems in its 15 years of operation from 1985 to 2000, and publishers Sunsoft, who themselves had quite a turbulent history. A subdivision of parent company electronic manufacturers Sun Corporation, they found success in the age of the arcade and carried this over to home consoles, especially on the Famicom and Nintendo Entertainment System, with titles such as Icky, Albert Odyssey, and Gimmick, and their continued success led to the acquiring of top title licenses such as Looney Tunes and Batman, with many early games appearing on the NES and the Game Boy featuring the Cape Crusader being published and developed by Sunsoft themselves. However, the success of Sunsoft came to a stilted halt when in early 1995 the whole company were making preparations to file for bankruptcy. A lot of the properties had been given over to their partner, then top dog publishers Acclaim Entertainment, and a few employees were left within Sunsoft to wrap up a few titles that were near completion. As it transpires, parent company Sun Corporation had invested millions in golf course development in Palm Springs that had completely fallen through and left the entire company in jeopardy. The company managed to hold on and brought out new games for the Game Boy and PlayStation, and one new title for the N64, which was supposed to be a Japan exclusive until Nintendo pushed for an international release, a title which I have recently played. The game is presented as a 3D puzzle platformer of sorts, and when you load it up for the first time, if you have no prior knowledge or experience with the title, you'd be forgiven for being a tad confused at proceedings. You're given a character selection screen and able to choose from 4 non-distinct polygon avatars. It's unclear as to what exactly they are, and they each have different colours and names, but that's the only variety they provide, for the gameplay is the same when controlling each of them. I'm led to understand there is some printed lore out there that attempts to give each of them backstory, but in the context of this experience, we're left ignorant. Once selected, the opening cinematics load, and there's a chameleon. Good. This is Chameleon Twist, after all. I would feel remiss without seeing the eponymous creature. But then a white rabbit in a waistcoat and top hat, equipped with a pocket watch, dashes past, decrying how it's running late. This is clearly ripped from the pages of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and even if you've never read the book or seen the movie, chances are you'd still recognize this very well-established staple of pop culture. And so, having it in the context of the game is very bizarre. It's used as a framing device of sorts to give justification for the transformation that happens. The white rabbit jumps into a pot, the chameleon follows and gets transformed into the unrecognizable avatar we had previously chosen. The rabbit then serves as a guide of sorts, being present at the beginning of each level and offering some words on what's to come. But there's no explanation on why it's there, why it's helping us, what it's late for, who it is, what this world is. It just seems that the developers wanted a way of transforming a recognizable chameleon into the playable character, and instead of thinking of their own narrative to do so, ripped a pre-existing one out of media and pasted it on top. And this doesn't sit well with me. There's no discernible story to this game. It's a collection of puzzles that had to have some sort of narrative justification, no matter how loose to tie it all together. And it just gives me a sense that it was a last-minute attempt to give some sort of effort of storytelling, but it just reeks of laziness. Now, don't get me wrong, sampling other media is done all the time. Video games, movies, books, music, they almost all reference something else, whether it be a slight nod or a fully themed homage to it. But in this title, there's no other references to Alice in Wonderland. There's no reason or explanation for this rabbit to be proclaiming its famous phrase of running late. There's nothing to justify the use of this very particular, instantly recognizable character in this game. And so within the first couple of minutes, there's confusion and a bitter taste left in the mouth. If they can't be bothered to create a new, explainable within the world of the game character, where else did they skimp on being original? Well, to give credit to Japan's supply system, the controls of the game are something quite unique. Every platformer has a shared base ingredient: walking, running, and jumping. Then there's that little bit of flavour to add something individual to each title, a ground pound or a talon trot. The seasoning in this instance is in the use of the player character's tongue, and justification for the choice of a chameleon. At any point, you're able to extend a prehensile tongue and employ it in various different ways, whether it be lapping up enemies to then fire back at targets a la Yoshi style, or to grab onto distant markers to pull yourself in to cover chasms, or swing yourself around in a complete 360. This new mechanic adds a welcome layer of novelty to the playthrough, since you'll be having to switch up your methods and approaches on the fly and make full use of the arsenal of tongue maneuvers available. Not all the kinks were worked out, unfortunately. There's a vast section of the game which relies on the execution of a specific technique, that being using your tongue like a pole vaulter in order to gain height and distance. But there's a specific timing that's needed in order to achieve effectiveness, and anything marginally less or more than the exact desired input will result in you more likely than not falling to your doom. Luckily, since the levels are broken up into self-contained cells, failing at any point won't set you back too far, but it can be frustrating to take time to make progress on a level just to have to redo it all again because of not succeeding in one tricky moveset. Talking about levels, there are 6 in total, each individually themed, and the playing of which is the same throughout. Make it past the gauntlet of puzzles to clear to the next space, and eventually face off against an end-of-course boss. Along the way, you collect crowns. Why crowns though? And these will tally up to unlock some secrets. Let's just take a quick look at what each level brought to the table. After your transformation, you start off in Jungle Land, aptly named as you're having to explore a verdant cascading course of obstacles, climbing grassy knolls and jumping across lily pads on the raging river, and this first level gives you a sense of what could be. The camera is somewhat fixed on a point, giving the game an almost unbound isometric perspective, but there is still a small sense of freedom as the level continues to unfold in front of you, and although the progress is linear, the course seems expansive and fully realised. You then go into the mountainside, exploring the tunnels of a mining operation, and this is where the gameplay turns into completing individual cells. The puzzles are contained within these small areas, and as such become trickier and full of more instant defeat pitfalls, as failing here would just respawn you not too far away. It's a nice change of pace from before. The explorative nature of the outdoors give you a gentle chance to explore the controls, with this new format allowing you to put those recently acquired skills to the test, and some of the challenges are quite puzzling, and you feel a sense of achievement for completing them and an extra boost for going out of your way to collect the crowns. You come across your first enemies, plagues of spiders, poorly rendered 2D models which serve a purpose in introducing you to the combat mechanics of the game, namely the consumption and expulsion like a round of projectiles. Eventually you come to the end of the course and square off against the level's boss, namely a giant ape. It seems out of place until you remember that this is Jungle Land, but because the last 5 minutes have been spent in an underground mining operation, you're forgiven for forgetting the context. Standard operation here: avoid the falling boulders, eat the butterflies and shoot them at the big bad in order to bring it down. Easy enough to do, but spoiler alert, this is the procedure for every boss, which gets more disappointing the more you face. You know the level will end in a big battle, and so the least they could have done is to add some variety in takedown, but the formula is always the same: avoid, consume, fire. Once the ape is defeated, you're thrown into the menu select screen, and what's canonically next is Antland. And now we have more than one level we're able to contrast, and this is when it becomes apparent that variety isn't all that extensive. There is some, not in gaining new moves, but in the way your existing moves can be utilized, as shown as an example in the opening cinematic of the selected level. In this instance, being able to swing around by your tongue and sweep the feet from under your foes. Once you employ this tactic for the first time, it's like, oh, cool. But then after that, it's back to business as usual. Avoid falling down, collect crowns, make it to the end. In this scenario, you're traversing another underground system in individual celled sections and taking on ants. There are some thematic nuances, the ants marching in a line for example, but not enough to make the level stand out for anything in particular. Once the queen ant has been taken care of by your newly acquired method of sweeping the feet and firing its minions at it, we're into the third world, Bombland. Again with the individually celled structures, this time taking more of an industrial and mechanical theme to the art style, having to make your way through different sections by spitting out explosive foes in order to clear away blocks to make progress or dispatch enemies when other means aren't available. This does add a new twist to proceedings, the use of bombs being able to effectively clear the field and the foe line, but it's only implemented in this particular level. It perhaps would have been better to have this as an option throughout the game, leading to greater chances for exploration and different ways of playing. It's also here that I personally faced my most difficult obstacle when I was playing through. There's a section which requires you to destroy some blocks to make a staircase of sorts, which you then have to use the notoriously difficult pole vault technique in order to traverse. But because of the semi-fixed camera positioning of the game, leading to a lack of definable depth and orientation, and the difficulty of executing the pole vaulting move, it's a constant trial and error to try to figure out the necessary heights and to climb it at all, and one false move means you have to start all over again. It's just one of those examples when something so simple on paper becomes unnecessarily difficult due to the confines of what it has to work with in reality. Taking out the armored caterpillar by consuming and firing whilst dodging destroyed ground tiles leads you into world number 4, Desert Castle, and finally we're back to that relatively open level plan that we haven't seen since the opening stage. The new obstacle on offer here being spikes that stick out the ground which can be temporarily abated by licking them. Then you're off to tackle a somewhat drab, oppressively designed landscape. Reminiscent of a Bowser course from Super Mario 64, you have to navigate a mismatch of thematic ideas, running against quicksand, climbing floating brick platforms, avoiding the knockoff Sarlacc pit, and taking a magic carpet ride, which honestly made me feel nauseated with the way it was animated, the difference in speeds between background and foreground making a jarring blend for the eyes. Eventually you make it to the armadillo of sorts, and once you've rinsed and repeated the dodging, consuming, firing routine, you're propelled into level 5, Kids Land. Now, I was a kid when this level was designed, and I can safely say this is not a land I would like to live in. Over-the-top mismatch of colours, platforms made of crackers and s'mores, eating chocolate chips to take down I'm not even sure what they are. It's almost like a fever dream brought about by an overdose of sugar. The gameplay is exactly the same as the other levels, just in a nonsensical, unrelated theme of the world. In the other courses, at least you're able to stretch some sort of narrative justification. The ants are out to get you, so you take down its queen. You've infiltrated the home of the ape, and now it's defending itself. The armadillo is the king of the castle you've just stormed. Here, however, make it across some platforms and take down a giant birthday cake. What's more, a mechanically operated birthday cake being controlled by sentient chocolate chips. Once D-tiered, you make it to the final level, Ghost Castle, and this course, in all credit, stands out for being a bit more original. Taking place in the titular castle, the individual cells are laid out like rooms within a building, offering various different paths for you to progress with, and each room is themed differently, taking place in a kitchen, an attic of sorts, and of course, perfectly toned for a children's game, the wine cellar. There is a secret room accessible to you if you've collected 50 crowns throughout the game, giving you the chance to play a giant game of pool, with your tongue being used as the cue. An imaginative way to utilize your powers, and would have been a fun distraction and something to return to if the issues with the camera weren't persisting. Having it in a fixed position means you can't see where you're aiming. Surely an aerial view could have been implemented just this once. Regardless, if you've sunk the balls or not, make it through to the final room and you come across the final boss. A possessed collection of casks, cabinets, and corrugated fans. Why? I'm guessing the ghosts of the castle have haunted them? Avoid the extending arms and dodge the rapid fire assault, and that's it. Game completed. Roll the credits and have one last chat with the White Rabbit, offering you to come back and play again, and just like that, you're back to being a chameleon. Now with a backpack. It's nice to be reminded that this was actually a game about chameleons after all this time. And as Davey, or whoever you've chosen, walks away without a clue of what to do next, as are you left, wondering what was the purpose of the whole 2 hours you've sunk into this experience, and whether anything actually made sense at all. Just as a quick aside, the soundtrack throughout is annoying. Yes, fun plinky-plonky tones are great for energizing, but with little variation throughout and the constant barrage of upbeat beats, it becomes oversaturing and just grating. I've come down a bit hard on this title. Maybe I'm right to. Or maybe it's because I don't have the glasses of nostalgia to look through. Playing it after so many years of advancements to gameplay, mechanics and storytelling, perhaps the original charm has completely passed me by. Reading posts in forums about the game, there are a lot of people who love it and hold very fond memories of it. But the common thread that kept popping up was that this was a good rental. It certainly doesn't justify a full-priced purchase, and if you were to, I feel disappointment would be abound with how quickly the whole experience is over. There is a multiplayer mode, but it's flawed and doesn't really add anything to the experience and definitely isn't refined enough to carry the weight of replay on its shoulders. A Sunday afternoon cheap rental will be sufficient to get everything you needed out of this game, leaving you the week ahead to wonder, what the heck was that rabbit doing there? And that was my review of Chameleon Twist. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, why not give the video a like and leave a comment if you agreed or disagreed with my thoughts. And feel free to subscribe and stick around as I play through more N64 games as well as more gaming content to come. But for now, my friends, luck and more to you all, and catch you next time.